Consider this, a news and information program recorded on the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha. From the Fireside Lounge in the Milo Bale Student Center, here is your host, Carol Schrader.
Hello and welcome back to UNO. This past week, the unicameral gave second round approval to LR11CA, which probably doesn't mean anything to you, but if I say it is a bill that, if passed, would put the option of casino gambling on the ballot on 2004, I think you would know what I was talking about. Is the one proposal that sort of survived this session, in a session that was certainly doomed to consider it, and we will find out if they are meant to pass it. My guests this week are not here to be either for or against LR11CA. Got to have a number in it or it's not in our unicameral. But they are very familiar with the fact that gambling would not be new to Nebraskans if we pass that constitutional amendment, and certainly the problems wouldn't be new. My guests are Tim Christensen. He is the program manager for the Nebraska Gamblers Assistance Program, which is a state agency that funnels money from lotto monies, keno monies, bingo monies, some of that money into gambling assistance. Also with us is Jerry Bauerkemper. He's the executive director of the Nebraska Council on Compulsive Gambling, which among other things handles the helpline. That is a number that you'll see throughout this show. And if you know someone that needs it or you think they might, I'd write it down. It's always good to keep. Thank you.
Very much.
Thank
you for having us.
I don't want to seem for or against it because I think that if it goes on the ballot, there'll be plenty of time to discuss that. But I think that in my experience in Nebraska, having been one of those kids that got schlepped to the racing track and the kid and loved it, and Jerry and I have talked about it. But I've seen gambling, and I've seen problem gambling from the time I was very small, and it certainly exists today.
Oh, certainly, and it's definitely a devastating disorder when it happens to a family, and it not only impacts the individual, but also those around them. Current research is showing around 3% of the adult population will experience some form of problem or pathological gambling in their lifetime. And also of great concern is about 3 to 5 times that of adolescents will experience problems. So that's certainly a concern.
Problem
You
too.
bet.
I understand the governor at one of your conferences discussed the concern about teenage gambling. And there are all kinds of ways to look at this, but during some of the testimony on LR11CA, Senator Philip Erdman said that Nebraska has 41,000 problem gamblers, and that if left untreated, that can cost the state about $210 million. And we don't think of ourselves as a gambling state. We know, living in Omaha, that we're next door to real access to higher stakes gambling. But even if you shut off the casinos, they disappeared from across the river or up in Rosebud, or there's other borders, that it wouldn't go away, would it?
No, absolutely not. We already have gambling in our state. We have sports betting, and Nebraska is a huge sports betting state. We have keno, and that's probably our second most popular form of gambling, other than casino type. We have bingo, we have lotteries, both scratch-offs and Powerballs, and we have March Madness, we have pools, we have...
I've never done any of that.
Yeah, I know. No one has.
Right. But we also have what I call growing the internet gambling, which we'll talk about a little later, because it's kind of an insidious form of gambling that is really out of the reach, in many cases, of federal and state and local regulators.
Yeah, clearly you can lose your home from your home at this point in our technology, in that you can gamble, and there will be thousands of sites that will allow you to do that.
We'll go into that a little more, because I think it's fascinating, just the proliferation. The gambling picture in Nebraska can vary where you live.
Sure.
Obviously, living near 3 casinos here, it'll probably be a higher number of casino addicted, whether it's the card games, whether it's those great one-armed bandits, the real instant gratification stuff with the higher stakes. But you can go anywhere in the state, and depending on what's available, right?
Sure. And there's several ways of looking at it, and I think most people focus on the Council Bluffs casinos and forget that actually 5 of the 6 border states have legalized gambling, and not so coincidentally, they opened the casinos not too far from the border. For instance, in South Dakota, Colorado, Kansas, Missouri all have casinos legalized.
Comes under the category, wouldn't you do that too?
Well, sure, yeah, it's common sense. The other concern that we have here in Nebraska that's been addressed in the legislature a few times, at least through hearings and whatnot, is what they call gray machines. In other words, the machines in neighborhood bars and in smaller towns where they're supposed to be for entertainment purposes only, but there is wagering going on with them. So there's a wide variety of availability to gambling here in Nebraska.
You talked about the youth gambling, and maybe they don't see the gray machines and maybe that, but how are youth getting involved in gambling? I mean, I would think other than, I suppose you could bet among your friends, but I guess that was just something that wasn't in my terrain.
Sure. Well, let's lay the groundwork first. The average person who has a gambling problem in the state of Nebraska is going to start gambling with their own money about age 11. And that's before they smoke, before they have sex, before they, drink. So gambling has been a part of our community and our culture for a very long time. And they will play cards. I mean, don't you remember playing cards with your parents and for pennies and quarters and nickels?
Absolutely.
Well,
now that you say it.
They'll play that. Contrary to popular belief, come Christmas time, lots of kids get lottery tickets that they can scratch off from grandma or grandpa or whoever, or even from their parents, and they will bet on the games, the high school games, amongst each other, et cetera, and much like there is people in the schools that will be peddling drugs, there'll be bookies or probably runners for larger bookies in the schools.
Where have I been? I've always kind of patted myself on the back that I'm not too naive, but that's one that surprised me.
If you're not looking for them, you're not going to find them. And most people won't, but if that's the nature of the kind of thing that you want to do, the excitement that you want to, you will find that group, and you will begin to hang around with that group, the betting crowd.
It is a rush, and all young people, it's just in their nature to look for a rush. It could be anything from being in the theater to being on the football field to maybe gambling, but that's just sort of the nature of the beast, and it comes on, around puberty, and it's just you live a little bit on the edge.
Mm-hmm. The difference here is that if I said to you, drinking for adolescents, and you were a parent or you were a school teacher, there would be some negative connotation to that. If I said to you gambling and teenagers, what would be your reaction?
Well, it'd be a little different because I wouldn't see, from my experience, dead bodies at intersections,
right,
and those kinds of things, and possibly date rape, and
right,
those kinds of things that we worry about, and personal
right,
integrity, physical integrity.
And we don't see it as a negative. We see gambling as a positive,
or at least a neutral.
Or at the very least a neutral. We don't have sayings or this is your brain on gambling. We don't have those kinds of cultural messages. What we have is messages that say, if you don't play, you can't win.
Oh, gee, I've heard that
1,000 times.
1,000 times.
And so what you have as an adolescent is a positive, or at very least a neutral stance. So, and there's no negative connotations, and there's no discussion of the possible consequences somewhere down the line.
And they may not be looking for it. Like, teachers have enough on their hands just to
right,
teach, but then they're also trained to look up for drugs and
right,
maybe physical abuse, and just there's certain kind of laundry list of
sure,
important things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's part of what allows an adolescent to progress further and further is people don't know what to look for, and even if they do, sometimes it gets lost in some of the other issues.
Okay, so we've got youth and increased gambling. We have, on the other end of the age spectrum, we see, and I have seen some of the saddest cases in my life. And I don't mean to put the casinos down, but I mean, I can just see them there. Mm-hmm. Lonely people. Many of them are just at the nickel machines, but
right,
it's their entire, it's not just the gambling and the rush, it's their entire social world, mm-hmm, which is real limited at an older age. So it's like really compounds the kind of the complexity of the problem.
One of the things that is important about gambling is there's the early onset gamblers and the late onset gamblers. And the late onset gamblers usually start gambling as a result of a loss. And that loss could be a divorce, a retirement, change in jobs,
A dead spouse.
a dead spouse, anything that would be considered a change or a loss.
Those major crises
Right.
things.
Or a physical health
Changes.
loss. And so what you're going to find is a lot of the players that are at the slot machines and things like that that have gambling problems are escape type gamblers, and they're doing exactly what you're telling you. They're lonely, they're physical ailments, they're things like that they are taking care of there and coping with their lot by gambling. And they get into trouble a lot faster because they get more engaged in it, because it is relief from their loss and from
Plus,
their
they
escape.
don't have to go to, and I know a job can be totally messed up or a family can be totally messed up by gambling, but they don't have that to go to even, create a distraction
Right.
or
You can
for
spend
them.
more time, and one of the signs is increased time at gambling, and they spend more time there. And the thing about it is, wherever they're gambling at, people get to know them. They get to
They're
talking to
friendly.
them. They're
They're-
friendly to them.
Sure.
And if you were lonely and if you were looking to fill time, wouldn't you like it to place someone that knew your name and that treated you nicely? And
which
that-
the elderly often,
yes.
that's not a part of the scheme of their life. Not that
Right.
people dislike them, but they're just not included. There's not
Right.
that sense of inclusion.
You bet.
You're in a club, so to speak.
And gambling places will include you.
Yes.
And that's not necessarily a negative, but for some older adults, that is a trigger, and all of a sudden they're down that gambling road, and they're in too deep to get out.
Now for that, we go from the young to the old, and we've got all this in between. There are similar triggers. May they just not maybe a little more complex or what? So the rest of them, which you can't lump all together per se, but there are still a lot in that middle group.
And I think, one of the things that we talk a lot about is people in that middle group, maybe specific to them, would be having the big win at first. In other words, they go one of their first 2 or 3 times they gamble, they hit a jackpot or they hit a significant amount of money, and they get the perception that that's going to happen all the time. And so they go back and they're always what we call chasing that first win. They want to get that feeling back, that rush back, and so we'll pursue that into problems.
I have read that so many times. In fact, I had friends that like won a daily double at Exarban years ago. Very young friend then, or a peer, and it was just like his first time at the races, and I thought that was an anomaly. So he kept going back, and he had a real problem. But I read that over and over again, that rush is so incredible and is so contrary to the way life works. You always have to kind of put in your time.
Sure.
And life is a plodding thing.
Right.
But is it part our brain chemistry and part our just wanting that rush or
Well, part of it is an instant gratification society, and another part of it is Americans are a risk-taking population to begin with. I mean, when you think about our entire history, we have a history of coming across from Europe, death-defying, and then we have our entire culture moving west in covered wagons. Now, what a huge risk that was. We are a risk-taking culture.
and the
Add
whole
risk-taking-
capitalistic ethic
Yeah.
that we have, that we I'm sure at some point we'll tell the people of Iran when we finish with that, is that they will hear, one of the first things they hear, just because they or have heard it from friends, is that you can go and you can turn with hard work and turn $1 into $1 million,
Right.
and they'll
Sure.
quote some case. And yes, that does happen, but generally it's a plodding,
Right.
day at a time thing.
But we are an instant gratification process
That is true.
culture right now. Whatever happens has to happen now. I mean, we're talking about an Iraq war that 2 weeks into it or 3 weeks into it.
We're impatient.
Why isn't this over? Why haven't we won yet? Well, the Vietnam War lasted 10 years. But see, you add that to an instant win process. If you come, you can win. If you play, you can win.
And if you don't play, if
You
you don't
can't
keep
win.
playing,
You can't win riches beyond your belief. I mean, when we're talking about $10 million, people don't even get in the lottery for $10 million. How many of us in our lifetime are going to make $10 million? But we get it to $50 million, everybody gets in, or 60 or 100. And when it gets to $180 million, everybody buys multiple tickets because, I mean, that's wild. I mean, it's wild winning. And you will never have to do anything again for $1. Now add that to a daily process of gambling where you can do that every day, and pretty soon you have a process where if you do win, boy, this is easy. I'm going to come back and do this again because I can be a winner. And that is
But
a
we all
powerful
know the
motivation.
house wins.
No, we know
Not
the
everyone
house wins.
does, though.
We know the house wins.
Oh, I've got a system, or I've got a machine,
Right.
and I've got, yeah.
Exactly. I mean,
But somebody will tell you every day about how they beat the house. And if you go to work,
To validate your belief system.
your own belief system that yes, it could be me.
Okay, let's talk. We talked if Senator Erdman is even in the ballpark, 41,000 Nebraskans, which I don't know if that represents 3% of the
pretty
population. And we're talking about families, marriages, and things that are, whether people want to believe it or not, I mean, you can show the cases over and over again that are devastated.
Absolutely.
You know, just things are ruined. And so lost income, lost wages, lost lives, lost families. How much does Nebraska, the Gamblers Assistance Program, have to deal with 41,000
Right.
potential clients?
well, unfortunately, not as much as we would like, but we do receive around $700,000 per year to run outpatient treatment programs, the helpline that Jerry runs, training of professionals in order to help people. We try and do some public awareness and different things to combat the problem. But it pales in comparison to the social costs that will come as a result of the people that do develop problems. It's not what we would hope it would be, but we are doing our best.
Now, $50,000 of that comes from the charitable gaming, which
Correct.
covers things like pickle cards, bingo, and Keno, if my memory
Right.
serves me correctly. And the rest of it comes from the state-operated lotto, which is the scratch and play, and of course Powerball and the state
Right.
lotto. So there is money there. At least we do have it now. As I understand it, LR 11CA does, being a constitutional amendment, as they tend to be, don't go into specifics about how much would go for gambling addiction,
Right.
as the Powerball enabling constitutional amendment did not.
Right.
But obviously they've got to be talking about that down in Lincoln.
Yeah, I can tell you that the Senator Jansen and several of the other senators that are signed on have all said, if this were to go in front of the people and be ratified, then we will come back and we will allow 1% of the revenues to come back to helping problem gamblers.
Because we have to put together a statute anyway, which
Right.
would specify how gambling, what
The
can go on
revenue.
as a result of this constitutional amendment. In
Right.
other words, the specifics
Right.
of the gambling plan for Nebraska.
And that money would go to the Health and Human Services, and Tim would administer it.
Yeah. And what we would hope to do is take what is easily called a public health approach. So in other words, as Jerry said, and I think you alluded to before too, you know, every school teacher in the nation knows how to look for alcohol and drug problems in an adolescent. They've been educated on that. Everybody knows that it's not healthy to smoke. Everybody knows that all these kinds of things, and those were all done through a public health approach. In other words, steps that were taken on a public policy level to really address that, to educate the public on what the dangers are, what the warning signs are, and where to get help if a person would want it. And that's what we're hoping to do with gambling, is to really educate the public. These are some of the problems that can happen. These are the things to look for. If it does happen, here's where you can go for help.
Well, Senator Landis said in the testimony that access breeds consumption, and he was referring to the gambling, and I think you could go to the next step and say consumption breeds a certain percentage of addiction. And so even if you can't stop all the addiction, perhaps it can be stopped at an earlier
Sure.
stage, or someone can stop themselves maybe once in a while. And I know that would be a few number of
Sure.
cases, but by getting this public awareness and because it has worked to some degree with smoking.
Right.
But it's taken years.
That's right.
Yes, it
And
does.
multiple campaigns, and only really since the lawsuit smoking proceeds have there really been a substantive amount
Right.
of money to deal with that. So I mean, I'm not, I'm saying, oh, danger, Will Robinson, except I am saying, I mean, I hope that they're going into this with eyes open of, really the percentage that it takes to really cover this.
Understand one thing right off the bat, that 3% of the population is going to have a problem in the state of Nebraska, and we already have enough gambling in the state of Nebraska that we already have the problem. We have the 3%. So adding another form of gambling or not isn't going to raise or drop the percentages. It may change the game people play and the speed by which they get in trouble, but it won't change the percentage of people that have a gambling problem.
It's a pretty consistent.
It's a consistent number.
nationwide.
Very much.
And so what we're trying to do, and what research is telling us can happen, is if we do a public health approach, if we do it properly, then we can reduce that number. We know what the top is, 3 to 5%. But what we also know is that if we do a public health approach, we can reduce the number.
If it's a really concerted,
If we do a good job.
consistent, yeah.
Yes.
And there are a lot of components to that. There are, for instance, spouses or significant others that would be able to spot it earlier and take a stand earlier. And there
Right.
would be children perhaps that could take. We've learned from Al-Anon and other things that it's everyone involved in the process
Certainly.
that might have a potential effect. And we don't know. We hope it's not bankruptcy and loss of family before somebody bottoms out.
And it's also changing societal views of it as well. Right now, if someone was to come up to you and say, well, I just lost my house because of my gambling, I think what would go on in most people's head is, why are you being so stupid? Just stop. And not understanding that it is a disorder, it is a recognized one, and
Although,
and needs help.
it's really funny with sports gambling. In social circles, many social circles, up to the point of about losing the marriage and the house, yes, you might know your friend has a problem, but it's not socially acceptable to rag
Say
on
that.
them. Like
Sure.
it kind of is.
You bet.
Even with smoking, I know it's gone overboard in some respects, and maybe that's good from a health point of view, but I mean, people will now take that further step
Sure.
to either help, intercede, say I love you and I care about you. I mean, it's more socially acceptable to do that earlier in the process,
Right.
so to speak.
It's raising the bottom.
Yeah.
And it's also helping people to not make the initial choice that could lead into the illness or the disorder. And we can do that. I mean, but what we've done so far in the state and across the country is deal with the people who are severely wounded already. The people who need
We've triaged them, and we've run out of
Right.
money after the most
after the
sort
most
of the most
severely
dangerous,
ill.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's-
after the
to
ones
use a
that
medical
after the ones that
phrase.
they're doing the crimes and the bankruptcies.
They're
and
critical.
Yeah.
That's who we're dealing with. Now we can continue to do that, but it doesn't change anything other than those 1,000 people's lives. But if we do a public health approach,
Maybe you
then
can
we can
prevent
change an
getting
entire culture.
everybody
on
in
it.
critical
That's right.
condition of that.
Or they
percent
don't
that
get
you
in
were.
critical before we get them.
Right.
And it makes it easier for us
Interventions
to
are
do.
easier
Yeah.
on the part of friends and family,
Absolutely.
and to
And that's really the key part is that if we can intervene earlier, you have a much higher chance of success. In other
it's
words,
like
of
any
changing
addiction
the
process.
behavior.
We've gotten better at intervening in
Sure.
alcohol and drug addiction, and I think that maybe sometime in people are more knowledgeable.
That's right.
They don't really know. They know we have to do an intervention,
That's right.
and at least they'll ask about it because they
Right.
heard somebody else did. In other words, we've gotten to the point where the general knowledge is high enough that they know to look.
That's
They
right.
know they're not alone. That this
Right.
happens fairly frequently, and it's not. They're not pariahs because they move ahead.
Or again, it's not also the stigma of they're doing it to themselves. Again, I think that one of the biggest barriers, especially for older adults seeking treatment, is they really take it on as I shouldn't have been so stupid. How could I have
And they come
possibly
from
done
an
that to
era
myself?
where you pull yourself up by your bootstraps and
Exactly.
everything is on your shoulders, and you
Right.
don't get help. You just don't ask for help.
Right, and that's a real concern, especially with this issue, because they can really dig themselves a deep hole in a short period of time.
Let's talk about that internet gambling.
Okay.
at least when we have casinos, at least when we have sports betting's a little more raucous and you can't hold on to it very well. It's all over the place. But you know, the legalized gambling, at least there is some restraints in that it's organized, it can be watched. That may not help addiction, but at least we have oversight. Sports betting is all over the place, but you add sports betting and the internet,
Right.
and this is pretty wild. It's skyrocketed, has it not?
Yeah, it's a potential for the future that we won't even need bricks and mortar casinos. You may, if you're visionary enough and you can get this passed in the United States, et cetera, that everyone could gamble from their own home.
But you can do it even though it's not legal in the
Right.
United States because
That's
there's all
true.
these offshore.
Yeah, but when you think about the policy that's and the devastation that can happen, I mean, you've got a group of people that potentially have solitude anyway.
Perhaps shut-ins,
shut-in.
perhaps just very lonely people.
Older
adolescents.
adults, adolescents.
Oh yeah, they do go on those computers.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about that group, those different segments of your population, you're talking about people you can't get to anyway. You can't treat those people because you don't even know they exist.
And you don't even know their gambling exists.
Right.
Because they obviously, you know, the fact that they're doing it alone, it's like drinking alone.
Right.
Sure.
Kind of.
You bet.
Talk about the downward spiral happening faster,
And no one observes it.
and no one can criticize it. No one can help it. It just spirals down without any knowledge of anyone.
You mentioned youths. I know before it was more difficult to use credit cards in internet gambling. I know teenagers that had swiped numbers
Sure.
from their parents, and that
can
wreaked a
rack
little
up.
havoc, major havoc.
Very much so.
We have about a minute, and I probably didn't cover everything you wanted to cover. But I'll give you each 30 seconds to drive home the most important on the state of gambling in this state.
Okay. I would say first and foremost is that we do have help and hope available to folks. In other words, if they call the helpline, if they reach out for assistance, we do have it available in this state. I think we can do more, and I think the possibility is there to do more. But we are doing a lot right now, and we do have it available. So,
Jerry, you just got to tie this up real fast.
Well, the only thing I can say, and I want to move it to a political realm, we have two chances here for expanded gambling. The state of Nebraska is going, the legislators, and they also have a petition drive that there may or may not go on. The state of Nebraska's proposal has help available. The petition does not. And from our perspective,
Keep that in mind.
it's scary.
Okay.
Yes.
I want to thank you, Tim Christensen, Jerry Baukemper. Remember that hotline is available, and you can also check it out on the web, all those W's, and nebraskacouncil.com. And we're on the web, unotv.unomaha.edu. Check this show out in a few days when it's ready to go online, and all our archive shows. Thanks for joining us.